Welcome to Thursday Book Club. I'm Suzanne Leal, and I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. And of course, I pay my respects to elders past and present. For anyone new, I'm the author of 5 novels, most recently The Watchful Wife and Running with Ivan. I started a Thursday Book Club during the COVID 2020 lockdown as a way to connect readers and writers online. And wonderfully, we've managed to keep on going. And we're still going 3 years on, and we continue to meet weekly on Zoom, and we have a guest writer to join us once a month. To join the Thursday Book Club community, if you haven't, please go to my website, which is suzanneleal.com, and you can click on then to get notifications. But tonight, it's all about Karen Biggers, and I'm so delighted to be in conversation with her. I've known Karen for a while now. Karen's a well-known, best-selling, award-winning author. She has a particular following in France, an enormous following in France, and she writes books that are contemporary and that examine contemporary issues and conundrums. Her most recent book is Sidelines, which for me is the story of pressure, both on the sports field and outside. Welcome to you, Karen.
Thanks, Suzanne. Great to be here.
Excellent. So just to situate us, Sidelines, give me your elevator pitch, or just for those who haven't yet read it and are looking forward to it, what would you say it's about?
Well, I describe it as a novel about junior sport and parents standing on the sidelines trying to support their kids to live their dreams. At least that's what I thought it was going to be, and it ended up being a whole lot more than that. It's really a novel that uses sport as a lens to look at modern society and pressures on families, and particularly on young people. And so it follows 3 families through a football season, right from the start. Well, it actually starts with an ambulance on its way to a football field because somebody's been injured in a junior game, an under 14s game. And the ambulance people, when they get there, are quite shocked. I'm not going to tell you who was injured because that's sort of part of the mystery of it. And then they go away being quite shocked, and it doesn't give anything away to say that there has been a brawl at a kid's game and somebody's been hurt. And then the novel casts back 9 months and follows 3 families through the whole season, through their family lives, home lives, school work, all of those sorts of things, all the frictions that develop within and between families and within and between teams, and all the things that sort of challenge us in our everyday lives, really. And the idea of the book is to look at competitiveness in modern society and explore that line between support and pressure and what the impact on young people can be if parents take that too far.
And how has it been received, as far as you know? And what sort of feedback have you had? What's been the reaction?
Well, look, I've had really fabulous feedback, actually. I've had people from all different sports, all different age groups, dance mums, all sorts of people write to me and say how much they related to the book and how they immersed in it, how for some people, particularly with young kids, how it sort of forewarned them not to take all of life too seriously. But it's been really well received. I've had a lot of good reviews and a lot of good feedback on Bookstagram. People with or without kids, young people even, and adults. So when I say young people, I've had people say that it's good for teens, sort of mid to late teens as well, because the story is told through the eyes of 3 parent and 3 teen characters. So yeah, I've been lucky. I've had great feedback, and that makes me really happy, Suzanne, because you know what it's like writing a novel. This one's taken longer than usual. It's been a 5-year journey. I wrote it quickly early on, but it's been a 5-year journey. So I wanted, with this book particularly, I wanted it to do some work in the world. I wanted to use fictional characters as a way to connect to people and stimulate discussion about how to be better sports parents, how to facilitate our kids to enjoy sport more, or any competitive activity that they participate in, really, and how to enjoy it more and stay with that activity longer. So I wanted this book to do work and stimulate discussion.
Interesting how you spoke about the book spanning a football season or a soccer season. It's interesting, isn't it, for an author to find places where you can showcase your material and have it bookended. So for me, the school year has been a good way to do that, because, you know, there's a place to start, there's a place to end, and, you know, in terms of the school structure, what happens. Why did you choose one football season rather than, say, 10 years or one day?
That's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, and it actually doesn't make it right to the end of the season. It really I wanted to use the beginning of the season, like to go right from trials, because that's the point at which new kids can enter a team and which hierarchies within teams can be disrupted, and so new dynamics can emerge. And there's also a lot of pressure just around the trials as to whether a person's going to get into a team or not. So I knew that was a good pressure point to start with after the brawl, which was like, you know, a crux. And then I wanted to look at all the little things that can build. So what seems like not even that massive a trigger, like a line call that people disagree with, how what appears not to be a big event can explode into something enormous because of all those little things that build over time. And I felt that having that soccer season, or about 2/3 of it, gave plenty of room for the relationships between characters to develop, for the tensions, which are already there to some extent between teams, but within families as well. You know, like, I wanted to write about that age group. I thought under 14s, like 13, 14-year-olds, was an interesting age group to write about, because that is a time of it's a bit of a pressure cooker in families around that age, I think. You know, lots of issues emerge for young people, coming of age, awakening sexuality, lots of pressures. I think we forget some of the pressures that young people are under these days, because none of us would like to go back and be teenagers again. But yeah, I think starting with the trials was a good place to enter the story, and then watch those things that built over time to the point of rupture, and then look at the fallout from there on what happens to people. So I did write the novel for adults, but it turns out it could be a good book for teens as well, because I did write those 3 teen characters.
And I think you've got book notes as well, not only for book clubs, but also sporting clubs, and I presume you were thinking of children in clubs more than adults, or both?
No, I really wanted the clubs and parents to be reading the book. I guess it's I feel like it is more of a book for. I aimed the book at adults because I wanted the parents to do some thinking about how they approach their kids' activities, and whether they're living vicariously through their kids. Like, sometimes it's hard to see in yourself. And I had my own moments of getting too invested in, I mean, everyone wants to see their kids win. Everyone wants to see their kids succeed. But when does it become about us rather than about them? And so I wrote the book for adults, but I also, some of the issues, like, there are some parents that get really out of hand on the sidelines. And I did want clubs, hopefully, to start thinking about how to deal with some of those parents. What's a constructive way to manage those parents, to try and avoid the impact that they have on the players, like, not only through their role modelling. Like, you see parents standing there yelling at the junior refs who are trying to learn and ref those junior games, the impacts it has on those. My son was a ref for many years, and ended up giving up because he just said, "I'm sick of it, Mum. I'm sick of the abuse." When he was 19, he gave it up. But you see, when parents do that, then the players start copying that behaviour and shouting and showing disrespect towards the young refs and each other as well. So there's that. But I also wanted parents who just sort of take it a bit far. Like, I did a lot of reading and research, Suzanne. So I looked at some research coming out of Melbourne University, that Victoria University in Melbourne, that interviewed a whole lot of people over different age groups, and asked them about their sporting experience when they were young. And it turned out that 1 in 3 people that they interviewed had experienced some sort of abuse when they were playing sport from their parents. And it was the main reason that young people gave for giving up sport. And there are so many good reasons for kids to be playing sport or doing any of those activities, but particularly team sport, you can list off a whole lot of really good positives, like learning resilience, learning to be team players, learning to win with grace and lose with dignity, learning to accept decisions that they don't like. There's mental and physical health and all those sorts of things. And yet, there's so many kids dropping out. So we want to find ways to keep them in longer. And that was my hope, that this book would help parents to look at themselves and their input to their kids' games, and hopefully come up with a better way of approaching it so the kids can enjoy it.
The book is very intricate in relation to how football works, how elite sport works. Is this something that you're familiar with? Are you a sportswoman, or?
Well, I grew up riding horses and eventing, so it was a very different world. It was me and my horse against the course, and so everyone was really supportive of each other. But I have had 14 years as a soccer mum myself, standing on the sidelines, watching kids play and referee football. And my husband was an ex-professional player, so that's what took us into soccer in an urban life in the first place. And you see a lot of interesting behavior in that time. And even though it's written about soccer, it could be any sport or any competitive activity. And I've been really careful to make sure it's not too jargony. So like you should be able to relate to the story. People from all sorts of different sports, have, as I said, come to me and said that, oh my gosh, this could be dance, this could be rowing, this could be music, this could be parents getting over invested in academic results. It could be anything. But yeah, I wrote soccer because it's what I knew.
So you said it took you 5 years. It's interesting to hear that, because I thought, oh, she's clearly done this book on the back of the Matildas, because suddenly we had this extreme outburst of support for women's soccer. How did the Matildas fit into your writing or your thinking or the publication of the book?
Well, that just turned out to sort of be good luck. But my daughter and my son both played for many years. And when my daughter was, I remember when she was in about under 10s, like all girls at that age, and even more so now, she said, oh, I want to play for the Matildas. And so we thought we were supporting her to live her dream. And she did play elite soccer. But, a lot of the stuff in the book, I've seen at all levels, like down to Div 3 in club football as well. So it's not doesn't just relate to elite sport. However, the Matildas effect has been amazing. Like, I don't think Australia knew what they were in for. It's such a great time for women's sport. And in fact, there's so many young girls and boys wanting to sign up that the clubs to play soccer, that the clubs just can't handle the influx. But it's been a lot of leaps forward for women's sport. I love the story that there was some young boys kicking a football down on a local field, and somebody overheard them saying, what are the boy Matildas called? So yeah, that's great. And I think I've been discussing with some people recently, like watching the Women's World Cup, like the spirit in which the game was played was just amazing. And we were trying to work out, is that just because they're women? But I don't think that it is just that. And I wonder if it comes from women have had to work hard to play at elite sport level. Like, they've been underpaid for a very long time, and they haven't had the recognition or the popularity until just recently. With the Matildas, it's been fantastic for all women's sport. But I wonder if it's because a lot of women realise that they're now coming into a greater period of privilege, because a lot of those women have worked 2-3 jobs as well as doing their professional sport to try and maintain a sporting career. So I wonder if that changes the spirit of the game.
Yeah, I've noticed I'm not particularly a sports person. I used to run, but I was never I learned tennis for a while, but I didn't want to wear my glasses because I was vain as a 7 or 8-year-old. So that wasn't great, given I was short-sighted. So I didn't actually connect with the ball very much, and that was the end of that. But what I wanted to ask you about was In relation to your children and their sport, do you think it's been a benefit for them in all? Or do you think that if you had your time again, you'd do it differently?
I would definitely do it differently. I think we did put too much pressure on. I'm not, the book is not my story and it's not my family's story, but I've drawn on a lot of observations and threads of people that I know and little bits of my own experience as well. I think it's very easy to get caught up. As I said earlier, we want our kids to do well, but to get caught up in that and it's easy for it to start to become a bit about your own feelings of success as well, when your kids have successes. And I wonder if that's been contributed to by social media for adults as well. And sort of some of I hate calling them brag posts, because people aren't putting up posts about their kids' successes just to brag. They're trying to celebrate, but that can have an impact on other parents and the way they view their own kids' lack of success as well sometimes. But I would do it differently. And so I suppose that in writing this book, I hoped that people might think about some of those issues and perhaps step back a little and remember that it's their kid, they want their kids to enjoy it. Like, ultimately, we do, there's only such a few kids, such a few people that are going to make it to elite level and to the top even less. So I think we get caught up. If our children have even a little bit of talent, we are led to believe that they could make it to the top. And I think that's because these days there's all these sporting academies and that sort of thing. It's become commercialization as well of kids' sport. So I guess I wanted people to try and keep a hold on reality. And about the real chances of their kids making it to the top, and then really think about what they wanted their kids to get out of sport, I think, or as I've mentioned a few times, any activity. So yeah, I would do it differently. One of the people that I spoke to, a journalist called Karen Hardy in Canberra, she said that her kids all played hockey and she was a hockey mum, and she said what she'd learned over time was, after a game, to just say, "I really loved watching you play today." That was it. And Libby Trickett, the retired Olympic swimmer, who clearly required lots of support to reach the level that she did. She's been talking a lot about parents and sport in recent times. And she says, if parents, if you can't go along and zip it, stand on the sideline and be quiet, then don't go. Drop your kid off and leave them there, because and I read something else the other day that said step back 5 or 10 meters from the sideline, because it removes you from the intensity of the play, so that you don't get so caught up in it and the passion of the game. It's a bit of a convoluted answer, but yes.
I've got a question from Dina Davis. How long did it take you to write the book, and what is your writing process?
Okay, so first draft was really quick because I was really angry about lots of things, lots of injustices I'd seen, not only to my kids, but to a number of other kids, and some of the behaviour I'd seen. I mean, the trigger for the book was actually a brawl breaking out at an under-12s game in Canberra, and that made me think, oh my gosh, what's wrong with these parents? Are they bad parents, or are they just normal parents that got out of control? But yeah, that first draft took 10 weeks, and it started with 9 characters.
Wow.
Yeah, I just went for it. I sat down and I dived straight in, and it started with Jonica, who is the key, the first character that we meet when you actually read the book. And then I decided to put that scene, the ambulance scene, at the beginning. I decided to do that later, so when I started to craft the novel. But then, the way that I wrote that first draft was bang, crash. And it wasn't very precious. I put all sorts of stuff down there and got it off my chest, I suppose. And then I had to work out how to fix it, how to make it a real story. And part of that process was working out that there were too many characters. So there were 9 characters, and I cut 4 and added 1. And it was also working out whose story it was, because originally it was hanging together as a series of vignettes. It didn't have a proper narrative arc. And so I had to work out whose story it was. So once I worked out it was Audrey's story, who is the 13-year-old girl whose mother we meet right at the start, who's trying to support her to live her dreams, and the father, Ben, who puts a lot of pressure on. Once I worked out it was Audrey's story, Then Ben, interestingly, was the character that I added because he helped to round out that narrative. And I might say, I can't remember who asked the question. Did you say it was
Dina Davis?
Dina, for that question. The way the novel is structured is there are 6 characters and each character has a section. So the narrative rolls from one character to the next, but you only visit each particular character once. So the next character takes the narrative forward. And so we go through the 6 parts to the book. And that was a tricky structure to write because every character still has to have their own arc. So we need some sort of resolution, but that had to be shown through whoever was carrying the narrative at that time. But yeah, the order was, once I worked out it was Audrey's story, the order of the characters became very clear.
And do you just write on a big Word document, or do you do it physically? How do you keep in your head these different strands?
Well, that's what takes time, I suppose, building the story. Like I spend a few months making notes and thinking about characters and thinking about what the story might be, what the narrative arc is going to be. And then I go in on the computer. This time I tried to be really organized, and I've got like 4 folders with each of the characters. I did a lot of I interviewed each fictional character with a whole range of questions to sort of learn a bit more about them. And so it's interesting though, because I don't know about you, Suzanne, but when I started doing that, that gave me a little bit of a lead into the character. But it's only once you have them acting, once you start to follow and see what they actually do, that they begin to develop as a whole person. And one of the mistakes I made initially too with this book was, because it was an angry draft, I found I was too judgmental of the characters, and that was too black and white. And it wasn't until I began to realize that, we're all flawed creatures, but we all have our strengths as well. And once, I realized that everybody acts well as at times acting badly, and they became much more rounded. And I started to love them more, that they became real. They became real people to me. So, yeah.
Got a thanks from Dina for your comprehensive answer, Karen. I've got another question from Katrina Davis. What's the best observation a reviewer has made about any of your books, and what's the worst? You want to start with the best or the worst?
Oh, God, that's a hard question. One reviewer for my second novel, The Lightkeeper's Wife, she said, "Oh, this is a great setting on Bruny Island and Antarctica. It should be a book like Wuthering Heights, but it fails to be Wuthering Heights." I'm like, wow, I'd love it to have been Wuthering Heights. But that's amusing, because that book went on to sell over 500,000 copies in France. So at the time, I think, I was probably oversensitive. It was second novel, and I hadn't had many reviews for my first novel, The Stranding, which came out in 2008. So, most of the review was good, but I don't know about you, Suzanne, but sometimes you zero in on that one sentence, which questions, how good, which you feel challenges whether it was the perfect novel, which, we all know we haven't written the perfect novel. We try. So that's not the lowest point of my career, but that was a point at which I remember having to pick myself up off the ground a bit in a review. The best review comments have come from a French bookseller called Gerard Collard, who helped probably to elevate The Lightkeeper's Wife when it went, kabang and went off in France and sold 100,000 copies in the first month. And he went on French TV France, and held up the book and said, "This is one of the top 10 books of the summer." And so it was. Like, he was like the Oprah of books in France.
Wow.
So, and him saying, Karen Viggers is one of the most important writers of the century or whatever, which maybe was it'd be nice to think so. But I haven't really had the same recognition in Australia.
So what do you think it is about France? Well, what do you think sparked such a chord in France?
Well, I think there's a few things. That interest, certainly, that support, and from the publishers over there was certainly helpful, extremely helpful. But there's a few things. They changed the cover and the title of the book. So different audience, of course, but they changed the cover to just a silhouette of a lighthouse, beautiful cover, and changed the title from The Lightkeeper's Wife to La Mémoire des Embruns. Have I got the pronunciation right, Suzanne? Which
yes.
embrun is an evocative word. It kind of means salty ocean spray or briny spray. So that the title therefore says the memory of ocean spray. And the French really loved that. They said that was an exciting title for them. And they find Australia a very exotic location. It's far away. It seems to them very wild. And the book was set in a remote place. They love lighthouses. They have a lot of their own lighthouse history. And there were a lot of French explorers that explored around Bruny Island and Tasmania, which is where that novel was set. I think also that the French like a good philosophical question to tussle with. Yes. Really into their philosophy and that sort of thing. And my books all hover above some sort of issue. And they don't necessarily need everything tied up with a pretty ending with pink bows. And so each of my books have said finish here, like they tell me where to stop. And I think that they end on an upbeat, but they don't necessarily tie everything up, completely resolved.
Oh, interesting. In fact, Shazam for Sarah and I, because as I was asking you that question, this is Sarah's question and comment. I've just bought The Lightkeeper's Wife. 500,000 copies is extraordinary. Why do you think the French loved it so much? So thank you for your answer.
Yes, well, if it had happened here, I would be Trent Dalton, but it didn't happen in Australia. In fact, I didn't even know about it. It was only because someone hashtagged me into a comment about the 100,000 copies being sold. Nobody had contacted me.
Really, it was like just a surprise. Extraordinary. I was in France a couple of years ago. I think it was at Varennes? So it might have been maybe it was before COVID. I think it was the before COVID trip and the after COVID trip. But I was in a shop trying to find, I don't know, stockings or butter or something, and there was a rack of books, and sure enough, there you were there in this small supermarket in Voiron, which is sort of near Grenoble. And it was a beautiful cover. You're right.
Yeah, and I think the French do those posh books really well. Look beautiful, feel beautiful, and they're really cheap, and they put them everywhere, in train stations, supermarkets, roadside stalls, all sorts of places. And so, I mean, I think that the readership is changing in France as well, but they're very avid readers. And when they go out to dinner, I don't know if this is your experience, Suzanne, but they told me this when I was over there doing some promos with my French publisher. And readers were saying, we don't take flowers or chocolate or wine to dinner. We take a book. And when I was in Gerard Collard's bookshop, people were buying piles of those posh books to take and give to people.
How interesting. Yes.
That's what we should do.
And I think what's also interesting about France is that there's no competition between booksellers. So it's a bit like, well, not like milk here, but like perhaps milk was, and there's a set price for a book depending on its size. So it doesn't matter where you go. It's like going to the bakery or like going to the corner shop. Well, yeah, like going to the bakery. It's your local bookshop, and that's where you get it. So in La Rochelle, where I was for a couple of months, there was, I think, it's a smallish town, it's a really pretty smallish town with, I think, 5 bookshops, all of them thriving, which was exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Sarah's asked, has Sidelines been sold into France?
Yes, it has. And I think that we're at the end of the translation, and I think it's coming out in January over there.
Oh, that's exciting. Oh, terrific. Well, maybe we could do one in French.
I have to
yeah. Oh, okay. Or maybe we could do one to celebrate the French, because I've got some friends there who'd be interested. Okay. We're getting towards the end of the time. Do you have some book recommendations for us? We like book recommendations.
This book was quite a departure for me. So my previous books have all been set in Australian natural landscapes, and often are sort of set around some sort of environmental or conservation issue. But I thought I didn't want to necessarily talk about 3. Did it have to be recent books? Because I've chosen 3 of my favorites.
You're the boss. That can be whatever you like.
So one book that I really enjoyed in the last couple of years was Cold Coast by Robin Mundy, which is set in the 1930s. She's an Australian author. She lives in Tasmania, but she's done a lot of work. She drives inflatable rubber boats for tour companies, and she's done a lot of work up in Svalbard or Spitsbergen, and also down in Antarctica. And she wrote a novel about the first female trapper who worked in Svalbard called Vanni Volstad. And it's an amazing book. So she's overwintered. She went out with a male trapper. She was the first one to as a female to go out there, and they were trapping Arctic foxes, and they had to watch out for polar bears and ptarmigan. And there was this really intense relationship or connection and disconnection and friction and all of the stuff. Trying to imagine living with just one person in a remote hut in a completely icy location for a whole year. So it's a really intense book, actually. Another book that I really love is called The Better Son by Katherine Johnson.
Oh, yes.
I love that book. She came out a few years ago, and she was longlisted for the Indie Book of the Year, and she had a couple of other awards. She won some Tasmanian Literary Awards as well, the People's Choice or whatever. But it's an interesting book because it's set in the 1950s in Mole Creek. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, in sort of north central Tasmania, where there's a whole lot of limestone caves. And it's about these two young boys that go exploring, even though they know they shouldn't, down in the caves. And one of the boys goes missing, and the other boy never tells quite the truth to his family, and it's about the impact of that incident on his life and on the family. It's a really intense book, actually. It's very good reading. I'd highly recommend it. And the third one I was thinking of telling you about was called The Islands by Emily Brugman.
It's lovely too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. It's really amazing. Again, it's set in the 1950s. And isn't this interesting? I'm not normally a reader of historical fiction, but each of these books are historical, obviously. But Emily Brugman set her book on the Abrolhos Islands, which are off Geraldton on the Western Australian coast. And it's not ancestors, but her relatives were Finns that migrated to Australia. And some of them did go and work in the cray fisheries in its very early days on the Abrolhos Islands. And so she based it on the experiences of her relatives. But it's a fascinating book in that it's written as a novel in stories. So she goes back and forth between a whole range of different characters, not just the Finns, but other people living on those islands as well, children and adults, but particularly follows one family through their time there, and then when they move away, and how that place affected them for the rest of their lives. And that was shortlisted for the Mudd Literary Prize and longlisted for the best debut fiction in 2023. So all of those books were award-winning, but they're beautifully written and very evocative of natural places.
As it happens, I'll be seeing Katherine Johnson on Tuesday, because we're working in Perth together, and we're going to be doing an author panel with Paddy O'Reilly and Katherine and me. So perhaps I could pass on your best regards.
I actually just saw Katherine a couple of weeks ago when we were talking together down in Tasmania, and that's not why I was promoting her book, because she's a friend or anything. It just is one of my favourite books. But yeah, she's delightful, and I'm sure you met her before. You'll have a lovely time.
Yeah. She's terrific. Now, just before we go, I need a number between 1 and 20, please, Karen.
Oh, 4.
4, okay. Okay, so the winner of a surprise to be sent to you is Rachel Lee. Congratulations, Rachel. If you would like to claim your prize, could you please send me an email? Just reply to the newsletter with your postal address. So there we go. And that's the end of Thursday Book Club with Karen Viggers. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And thanks so much, Karen. And
you're welcome. I should have said I normally live on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land in Canberra. And I'm sorry, if the lighting is not perfect here today, but I'm in a motel room in Sydney.
No, it's looking good. And you are, as I understand it, about to take a holiday, yes?
Well, yes, I'll be doing some work while I'm on the holiday, but we're going up to far North Queensland to a remote place where there'll be no internet, and
Wow.
then over Papua New Guinea, and I'm not sure what the internet will be like over there.
Oh, how exciting. I'll look forward to hearing about it all when you're back. So have a safe trip, and everybody else have a lovely week, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.